something I think we perhaps don't think about much, because as leaders we go on, but I want to talk from the thought tonight, a test for a leader, and kind of subtopic, when leaders are tested. And we want to find this in 2 Kings, the 5th chapter. And I want to look at these verses. Well, let me center. We'll just lift up the 13th verse. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Paraphrasing this verse, this anonymous servant comes near and speaks and says unto him, O my leader, if this prophet would have told you to do some difficult thing, wouldn't you have done it? How much rather such a simple request, wash and be clean? A test for a leader, when leaders are tested. In the ancient relationship of leaders and followers, one can see that the relationship works best when both function as both ought to. The leader leading, the follower following. One can also see how good followers, we've said this down through the years, make good leaders. But what happens when the roles are reversed? It's a promotion and an advancement when followers step up to be leaders. But what of the seemingly step down, or when the leader is challenged to follow? Hear the earnest plea coming from this anonymous speaker one more time. My leader, if this prophet would have asked you to do something difficult, something unreasonable, you would have done it. What's wrong with at least following his simple request? Wash and be clean. Against the background of the relationship between the Syrians and the Israelites, emerge our text tonight. The relationship had been a strained one, because the Israelites had been separated, in a sense, from their counterpart, Judah, after the split that occurred after the sons of Solomon. It was difficult for Israel, who would fall in 721 BC, to Samaria, rather, the capital Samaria, to fall, and to be ignored by their Jewish counterparts. For them to have, after a while, as John 4 reveals, no relationship with each other, not even to speak to one another. The Samaritans were considered as Samaritans and therefore alienated. Even some of them thought from the promise that God had made to Abraham and to God's people. So against that background, the Israelites, or those in Samaria, were trying to keep up in hope that they would remain and that they would one day see the coming of the Messiah. In doing so, they had a strained relationship, not strange, strained, with the Syrians. The Syrians, who had grown seemingly overnight and began to threaten them, conquered them, and took people from the Israelites' camp in as captives. In doing so, the Syrians then felt triumphant, and this only pushed down once again the feelings of those faithful that remained at Samaria. But all of a sudden, as God usually moves, Samaria became alive because an old desert prophet took up residence in Samaria. And in taking up residence in Samaria, wonders of God began to unfold. Word leaked out that there was indeed a man of God in Samaria. Isn't it funny how one of God's servants can change a whole environment? How one of God's servants can change a whole situation. As area vice president to moderators and pastors tonight, that ought to encourage us to represent God in the strongest way that we can, and not ever feel that there's any situation that we can't represent our God. And so the word leaked out, and in doing so, Syria was having a problem that they tried to keep within their confines, because they had won many battles because of their celebrated leader, a captain named Naaman. Naaman had led them into battle, but was refused to sit at the king's table. Ordinarily, he would be at the king's table just like everybody else. But Naaman was afflicted with the Bible's most dreadful disease, the disease of leprosy. Disease that alienated you from people, your own family, isolated you. And had he not been Naaman the battle-fighting captain of the Syrians, he would not have been even close. But because of his ability, the king kept the celebrated Naaman around, and word reached Syria that there was some help for this celebrated leader. Enter Naaman tonight. I'm not going to be long, but look at him, brothers and sisters. A man of great valor, a man of great ability, well respected. But that little word in grammar that presents the on the contrary, he was a leper. All of us have experienced some on the contraries. She's a good member of the church, but he's a fine deacon, but he's an excellent pastor. He's been to a good seminary, but she or he would make a good leader. But man of great stature, man of valor, but he was a leper. This is the disease that made you lose not only your place in society and in the viable areas, but also your own name. Because usually you're just simply known as a leper. But Naaman kept his name because of his reputation and because the king of Syria spent sleepless nights trying to cure his valuable and celebrated captain. Enduring so, he labored hard with this. And thus a great leader, a decorated captain, a man of honor and esteem faces the crucial test here in this text of humility versus pride. The record states his name, as we've already said. But the ironic twist to this ancient narrative hinges on the rise of those lower in rank with solutions that those above fail to come up with. A little child shall lead them. Out of the mouths of babes, oft time come Jim. I think about where our advice comes from. It's startling to me to find out that folk who can't read or write can sometimes give PhDs some good advice. Are we losing those mothers and all in the church that would say to young preachers, come here, boy, preach the good sermon, but watch how you live. Watch how you move about. Are we losing those parents who didn't graduate from Yale and can't spell the word seminary and college, but could take their would-be doctors and lawyer children aside and tell them, if you continue to stay with that company, you're going to get in trouble and you won't be anything. Don't allow yourself, remember they used to tell us this, to be too common with folk. People seemingly, educationally and all, intellectually, lower on the scale, giving advice to folk who have risen educationally above where they are. And so there's an ironic twist here tonight in this ancient narrative. A captive maid who serves Naaman's wife first mentions the prophet in Samaria who can cure leprosy. She takes care of Naaman's wife. She does menial tasks and duties, but she comes up with the gem of the text. Would to God the master would meet the prophet down in Samaria. Captive maid, the king of Syria, respecting political contacts, he contacts the king of Israel, respecting policy and protocol. He contacts the king of Israel with the assumption here that the one in charge is the one who knows. Bad assumption sometimes, isn't it? Isn't that a tragedy, though, sometimes? Isn't it a tragedy sometimes that the one in charge is not always the one who knows? That sometimes the one in charge got to find out what's going on from somebody underneath of them. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Sad to say, Brother President, I know none of these churches are involved, but some churches go and you don't know who the pastor is. Isn't that kind of sad? In fact, the pastor's trying to find somebody to find out who the pastor is. In some of our auxiliaries, the one who stands up and leads is not always the one who knows. King contacts him as protocol would direct him and contacts him, and when he does, the king of Israel is upset. Rents his clothes, gets upset, and wonders if the Syrians are trying to get another attack together. How can he embarrass me so? Am I God to make somebody alive and then kill them? Or kill them and make them alive? Can I cure leprosy? What is this? This must be a hoax. It must be a joke of some kind. Why would the king of Syria contact me about healing a man of leprosy? Well, the king was respecting protocol, went to the man in charge. But there was someone under the man politically, not spiritually, but politically. One in town that the king may not have been that aware of. And when the word got out that he had rented himself and that he had cried and he had become angry and didn't know what to do, the prophet appeared. Aren't you glad that God always got somebody in the right place when God needs somebody? Elijah comes in, understands the situation right away, looks at the king and says, bring the man to me. Bring him to me. This does not come under your duties, so bring him to me. Healing is my business, so bring him to me. You need to learn sometime in life that leaders have to learn how to be followers. See, my mechanic will hear me preach when he comes to Mount Olive, but I listen to him when there's something wrong with my car.